In the bustling heart of Akumba, a small but vibrant town in Africa, Pastor Elijah was the symbol of divine authority. His church, Fire of Glory Ministries, towered above the modest homes surrounding it. Every Sunday, throngs of worshippers, adorned in their finest clothes, flooded the church to listen to the man they believed was God's mouthpiece. Pastor Elijah had built his reputation on miracles, claiming to heal the sick, cast out demons, and bless his followers with unimaginable wealth. His favorite proclamation was, "The anointing flows through me. Your breakthrough is here if you believe." However, behind the pastor's dazzling sermons and elaborate prayers lay a dark secret. Every night, when the bustling town grew silent, Pastor Elijah would retreat into a hidden chamber beneath the church. This room, accessible only through a trapdoor behind his office, was an altar of unspeakable evil. Here he performed occult rituals, sacrificing the very people who trusted him. The more his congregation gave to the church, the more their lives crumbled, until they came crawling back to him for deliverance. Pastor Elijah thrived on their despair, feeding both his wealth and the insatiable spirit that empowered him. But his reign of terror began to unravel when God chose an unlikely warrior, 9-year-old Ada, a girl with a pure heart and unwavering faith. Ada was a curious and intelligent girl, the youngest daughter of devout members of Pastor Elijah's congregation. Her parents, Emeka and Ngozi, believed Pastor Elijah was a gift from God. They often dragged Ada to every service, prayer meeting, and crusade, urging her to pray harder for her future blessings. One Sunday morning, as the congregation danced and sang during the offering session, Ada noticed something strange. As people dropped money into the offering basket, Pastor Elijah stood at the pulpit, his eyes closed, mumbling strange words under his breath. His hands moved rhythmically, as though pulling something invisible from the crowd. Ada couldn't look away, a cold shiver running down her spine. Later that evening, as Ada prayed in her small room, a vision flashed before her eyes. Pastor Elijah in a dimly lit room, surrounded by burning candles and eerie symbols. He was chanting in a language she didn't understand, holding what looked like a human bone. A deep voice thundered in her heart, "The shepherd is a wolf. Speak, child, and my light will guide you." Ada shot up from her knees, gasping for air. Fear gripped her, but something stronger, an overwhelming sense of purpose, settled in her chest. The next Sunday, Ada stayed behind after service, pretending she had forgotten her Bible. She watched from the shadows as Pastor Elijah dismissed his assistants and disappeared into his office. Silently, she crept to the door, pressing her ear against it. Muffled sounds of movement reached her. Suddenly, she heard a low creak, like a door opening. Peeking through a crack in the door, she saw Pastor Elijah lift a rug to reveal a trap door. He descended into darkness, carrying a strange wooden box. Ada waited until the room was silent, then slipped inside. The trapdoor was slightly ajar. Taking a deep breath, Ada descended the wooden stairs, her heart pounding. What she saw froze her in place. The hidden chamber was lined with shelves of skulls and jars filled with blood. In the center was an altar, stained with something dark. Pastor Elijah stood before it, chanting as the air seemed to thrum with an unnatural energy. Suddenly, he turned, and his eyes locked onto Ada's. Ada ran as fast as her legs could carry her, tears streaming down her face. When she burst into her home, her parents were startled by her disheveled appearance. "What is it, Ada?" Ngozi asked, pulling her close. "Mama, Papa," Ada stammered. "Pastor Elijah is not from God. I saw him in a dark room doing evil things." Her parents exchanged worried glances. Emeka frowned. "Ada, that's nonsense. Pastor Elijah is a man of God. You're too young to understand these things." "But I saw it," Ada cried. "God showed me. He's using people's money to curse them. He's—" "Enough," Emeka's voice was stern. "You will not speak against a man of God. Go to your room." Dejected, Ada obeyed, but her resolve only grew stronger. The next day, Ada felt a strange presence following her on her way to school. She turned a corner and saw one of Pastor Elijah's assistants, a burly man named Mfon, watching her. Panicked, she ducked into a market stall and waited until he left. That evening, she overheard her parents discussing her behavior. "She's been acting strange," Ngozi said. "Do you think we should tell Pastor Elijah?" Ada's blood ran cold. Desperate for help, Ada confided in her best friend, Amina, a bold and quick-witted girl. Amina didn't doubt her story for a second. "We need proof," Amina said. "If we can show your parents what he's doing, they'll have to believe you." The girls hatched a plan to sneak back into the church during the night. Under the cover of darkness, Ada and Amina crept into the church. They found the trapdoor unlocked and descended quietly. This time, they saw Pastor Elijah performing a ritual with a photo of a family. Ada recognized them as regular churchgoers. A bag of money sat on the altar. As Pastor Elijah chanted, the air grew heavy and the family's photo began to burn without fire. "We have to stop this," Ada whispered. But before they could move, Pastor Elijah turned, a wicked smile spreading across his face. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with malice, "the little lamb has come to play." The air in the hidden chamber thickened as Pastor Elijah stood before Ada and Amina, his eyes glowing unnaturally. His assistants, Mfon and two others, appeared from the shadows, their menacing presence cutting off the girls' escape route. "Well, well," Pastor Elijah drawled, his voice deeper, layered with a guttural echo. "Did you really think you could expose me? Foolish children." Ada's knees trembled, but she stepped forward, holding the burnt photo in her shaking hands. "God sent me to stop you. You've deceived us for long enough." Pastor Elijah let out a bone-chilling laugh. "God, that powerless idea you cling to? My power is real, child, and now you'll see it firsthand." He raised his hands, muttering in an ancient tongue. The candles in the room flared violently, casting shadows that seemed to take on monstrous shapes. Amina grabbed Ada's arm, whispering, "We have to do something now, or we won't make it out alive." Thinking quickly, Ada scanned the room. She spotted a shelf with jars of blood and strange symbols painted on a wall behind the altar. "The shelf," she whispered. "If we knock it over, we can disrupt the ritual." The girls moved subtly, inching toward the shelf as Pastor Elijah's chant grew louder. Suddenly, Mfon lunged at them, but Amina grabbed a loose stone from the ground and hurled it at him, hitting his temple. The giant man staggered, giving Ada just enough time to push the shelf with all her might. The jars shattered, and a strange wind tore through the room, extinguishing the candles. Pastor Elijah screamed as the symbols on the wall began to glow, their energy spiraling out of control. "You fools," he roared, "do you know what you've done?" A deafening explosion shook the room, and when the smoke cleared, the girls found themselves alone in the chamber. The trapdoor had collapsed, trapping them inside. The girls stumbled through the dark chamber, coughing from the smoke. Ada clutched Amina's hand tightly, her resolve hardening. "We're not going to die here," she said, her voice firm despite the fear in her heart. A faint light caught Ada's eye, a crack in the far wall, barely visible in the gloom. The girls dug at the loose stones with their bare hands, their fingernails breaking as they worked. After what felt like an eternity, they broke through to the outside. The girls emerged into the night, gasping for air. They ran as fast as they could to Ada's house, where her parents were waiting anxiously. Ada burst into her home, clutching the burnt photo and a strange rune-covered cloth she had snatched from the altar during the chaos. Her parents stared at her in disbelief. "What happened?" Ngozi demanded, rushing to hold her daughter. "Mama, Papa, I have proof," Ada said breathlessly. She laid the photo and the cloth on the table. "This is what he uses to curse people. He burns their photos and takes their money to feed his evil power." Emeka frowned deeply, examining the evidence. "Ada, are you sure about this?" "Yes," she cried. "You have to believe me. I saw it with my own eyes." Ngozi glanced at her husband, tears brimming in her eyes. "Emeka, we need to do something. We can't stay silent." The following Sunday, Emeka and Ngozi arrived at the church early. The congregation buzzed with excitement, unaware of what was about to unfold. Pastor Elijah stood at the pulpit, his voice booming as he prayed. Midway through the service, Emeka stood up, holding the rune-covered cloth. Stop this charade, Pastor Elijah. You've deceived us for too long. Gasps filled the room as the congregation turned to look at Emeka. Pastor Elijah froze, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about, Brother Emeka? Emeka held up the cloth. This was found in your secret chamber, along with skulls and jars of blood. You're not a man of God, you're a servant of darkness. The congregation erupted in confusion and fear. Pastor Elijah's calm demeanor slipped, his face twisting in rage. How dare you, he bellowed. You come into God's house and accuse me of such vile things. Ada stood up, her small voice cutting through the chaos. It's true. I saw him performing rituals. He's been cursing us and using our money for evil. As more members began to murmur, one woman screamed, My husband died after he gave all our savings. Is this why? Pastor Elijah's mask crumbled. His voice grew deeper, more guttural. Fools, he spat. You think your God can save you now? I built this church, and I can destroy it. He raised his hands, chanting in the ancient tongue. The air grew heavy and the building began to tremble. But Ada, remembering her vision, knelt and began to pray. As Ada prayed, a blinding light filled the church, overpowering the darkness. Pastor Elijah screamed, clutching his head as the light consumed him. His assistants tried to flee, but the congregation blocked the exits, furious and determined to stop them. When the light faded, Pastor Elijah lay on the ground, powerless and trembling. Police arrived moments later, alerted by Emeka before the confrontation. The secret chamber was exposed, and the media swarmed the church, reporting the horrors Pastor Elijah had hidden for years. Pastor Elijah was sentenced to life in prison, his story becoming a cautionary tale across the country. The church was cleansed and rebuilt under new leadership, dedicated to restoring faith and healing the wounds he had caused. Ada became a local hero, her bravery inspiring the town. Though she was young, her unwavering faith proved that even the smallest voices could stand against great evil. Her parents, now more discerning, became her strongest supporters, sharing her story far and wide. But Ada knew her journey wasn't over. One night, as she knelt to pray, a voice whispered in her heart, The battle between light and darkness is eternal. Stay vigilant, my child, for I have chosen you. And so Ada prepared herself for the unknown battles ahead, her faith unshaken and her spirit alight with God's truth. With a soft smile, she whispered, Thank you, knowing that her journey had not only brought light to the church, but had also illuminated the strength within her. As she rose and lay down to sleep, the stars outside her window seemed to shine brighter, as if celebrating the new dawn in her life and her community.